Please, save me.
A white boy, 18, barefoot, barely able to stand.
I'm going to die here.
Lenora was 19, black, hungry, hadn't eaten in 2 days. In her hand, her last piece of bread. She looked at the boy, at the bread, at her trembling hands. She broke it in half, gave him the larger piece, kept the smaller one.
Eat it. You need it more than I do.
He bit into it like he hadn't eaten in days. All she knew, the boy was hungry, and she could help. What she didn't know, what she could never know, was that 10 years later, a famous young man would knock on her door, and the whole country would know what she did that cold night. Lenora's life would never be the same. Now let me tell you about Lenora Williams. She didn't grow up with choices. She grew up with consequences. Both her parents were behind bars before she turned 10. Mother, drug charges. Father, armed robbery. Just two people who disappeared from her life like they'd never been there. Grandma Odessa raised her. A woman with bad knees and 2 jobs. Nursing home aide by day, laundromat attendant by night. Lenora folded other people's clothes at 12, not because Odessa asked, because she saw her grandmother limping home at midnight, and decided that wasn't happening alone. Their apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a brick row house in East Baltimore. Ceiling leaked when it rained. Radiator clanked like a broken heartbeat. In winter, they slept under 3 blankets and still woke up cold. But Odessa never once said they were poor. "We ain't got much," she'd say, "but we got enough to be decent." That was the rule. You share what you got. You help who you can. You don't wait for a reason. Lenora carried that everywhere. Honor roll every semester, but couldn't afford the AP exam fees. Teachers noticed her. The system didn't. Scholarships required applications that required internet that required money they didn't have. She kept a small notebook, called it her proof book. Every time she saw someone do something kind, a stranger paying for another's groceries, a bus driver waiting for a running passenger, Odessa slipping extra food to the neighbor's kids, she wrote it down. Dates, details, handwriting pressing hard into pages like she was carving evidence into stone. Her proof that good still existed. Now, Ethan Caldwell didn't end up on Lenora's porch by accident. He ended up there because every single person in his life had failed him. His father, Senator Harold Caldwell, Republican, Virginia. The kind who looked perfect on C-SPAN and disappeared in real life. When Ethan was 10, his parents divorced. Ugly. Public enough for the local papers, private enough to bury the damage. Harold chose his career. Vivian got custody. Not because she was fit, but because Harold didn't fight for it. Vivian tried. She really did. But addiction doesn't care about trying. Pills first, then worse. She and Ethan drifted, month to month, motel to motel, relatives' couch to shelter floor. Harold sent money sometimes, never called, never showed up on birthdays, never once asked Ethan how he was doing. That January, 2016, Vivian checked into a pay-by-week motel in East Baltimore. Left $11 on the dresser and a note that said, "Back soon." She didn't come back. 3 days. Ethan rationed the $11. A gas station sandwich the first day, a bag of chips the second, nothing the third. The motel manager knocked on the 4th morning. "Pay up or get out." Ethan had nothing. No phone, no coat. Vivian had pawned it. No contacts in the city. He had his father's office number memorized, but he'd rather freeze than call the man who abandoned him. So he walked. January, Baltimore. No shoes. His only pair had fallen apart 2 weeks before. The pavement burned cold under his bare feet. He knocked on doors. 6 doors. 6 times. Silence, or a face behind the peephole that turned away. The 7th door was Lenora's. She didn't ask why. Didn't ask who. She opened the door, looked at him like he was a person, not a problem, and pulled him inside. That night, after the bread, Lenora handed him dry clothes. An oversized sweatshirt that belonged to her father, the only thing she had left of his. They sat on the couch at 2 in the morning, both hungry, both exhausted. Neither could sleep. "What do you want to do with your life?" Lenora asked. Ethan stared at the ceiling. "Music. I want to make music." "What kind?" "The kind that makes people feel less alone." Silence. Then Lenora, quiet. "The world could use more of that." "What about you?" "Nurse. I want to take care of people, like my grandma does." They both said it the same way, like a wish they'd already given up on. In the morning, Odessa found them asleep on opposite ends of the couch. She didn't wake them. Made oatmeal for 3. Set the table. Something passed between them that night. Not romance. They were too cold and hungry for that. But recognition. The kind that happens when 2 people see each other clearly for the first time and remember it forever. The next morning, Ethan told Lenora pieces of his story. Not all of it, just enough. His mom disappeared. His dad was some politician in Virginia who didn't care. He had nowhere to go and no one to call. Lenora listened, didn't interrupt, didn't pity him. When he finished, she said one thing. "Call your father." Ethan looked at her like she'd slapped him. "You don't know that man. He picked his career over his own kid." "Maybe. But you're sitting in a stranger's apartment with no money, no shoes, and no coat in January. Pride won't keep you warm, Ethan." Nobody had spoken to him that directly in years. Not his mother, not a teacher, not a single adult. A 19-year-old who'd known him 12 hours just said out loud what nobody else would. Lenora handed him her phone, a cracked, prepaid flip phone with 14 minutes left on it. "Call him. If you don't answer, we'll figure something else out." Ethan held the phone, then dialed. Harold's office. A receptionist answered. Ethan said his name. There was silence, the kind that fills a room before something breaks. Then, "Stay where you are, we're sending someone." 2 hours later, a black sedan pulled up outside Lenora's building. A man in a suit stepped out. Senator Harold Caldwell had sent his chief of staff. Ethan stood at Lenora's door. He didn't move toward the car. "Come with me," he said. Lenora laughed softly. "Boy, I can't just leave. My grandma's here. My whole life is here." "Then I'm coming back. Soon, I promise." He reached for the sweatshirt to take it off, her father's. Lenora pushed it back into his chest. "Keep it. Something to remember Baltimore by." They exchanged information. Lenora tore a piece of paper from her proof book and wrote her address and Odessa's landline number. Ethan folded it carefully, put it in his pocket like it was the most valuable thing he owned. He walked to the car, opened the door, looked back at her one more time. Lenora stood in the doorway, arms crossed, half smiling, already looking smaller as the distance between them grew. He got in. The black car pulled away. She watched from the 3rd-floor window until it turned the corner and disappeared. Then she sat down, opened the proof book and wrote, "Jan 14, split bread with a boy in the cold." He smiled. He said he'd come back. She truly believed him. What happened next wasn't dramatic. It was just life doing what life does, pulling people apart without asking permission. Ethan sighed. Harold brought him to Virginia, enrolled him in boarding school. 3 months later, shipped him to a music conservatory in London. "Fresh start," Harold called it. But the truth was uglier. Harold was burying his mess. An addict ex-wife, a neglected son, a story that could end a career if it reached the press. London was far enough to keep everything quiet. Ethan fought it, begged to stay. Harold's answer? You want to play music? I'm giving you the best music education in the world. Don't waste it. So Ethan went. But the first thing he did from London was write Lenora a letter. 2 pages. Addressed to the row house in East Baltimore. Mailed it with shaking hands and a heart full of everything he hadn't said on that porch. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. But Lenora was already gone. Lenora sighed. 3 weeks after Ethan left, Odessa collapsed on the kitchen floor. Stroke, ambulance, emergency room, tubes, machines, a doctor explaining things Lenora was too young to understand and too broke to afford. The medical bills hit. Thousands they never had. They lost the apartment. Lenora packed what she could carry and moved with Odessa to a cousin's house in Prince George's County. Different city, different address, different life. The landline was disconnected. The old row house sat empty. Ethan's letter came back stamped in red. Return to sender. No longer at this address. He sent another, same result. No social media. Lenora had no smartphone, no internet at home. Ethan was 18, broke, alone in a foreign country with a new phone number, and no way to trace a common name in a city he barely knew. They were 30 miles apart, then an ocean apart, and neither one could find the other. Not because they stopped trying, not because they forgot, because life didn't care about promises made on a cold porch in January. 10 years is a long time. Long enough to build a life. Long enough to forget one. Or long enough to spend every single day trying to find someone who vanished. Ethan Caldwell chose the third. London. The conservatory was full of people who'd been playing instruments since birth. Ethan had a second-hand guitar and a head full of noise. He played open mics in Camden bars where nobody listened. Wrote songs on napkins in coffee shops. Slept on floors when dorm fees were late. But one song kept pulling him back. Written at 3 in the morning in a practice room with no heat. About a January night. A girl who broke her last bread in half and gave a stranger the bigger piece. A couch at 2 a.m. and a conversation about dreams that neither of them believed in. He called it January Girl. A producer heard it at a bar gig in Shoreditch. Said it was the most honest thing he'd heard in years. 3 months later, a single. 6 months, everywhere. Album went platinum. Grammy at 25. Tours, magazine covers, the kind of fame that changes everything except the thing keeping you up at night. Because Ethan wasn't just making music, he was searching. Every interview, the same story. There's a girl who saved my life. She split her last bread with me when she was starving. I've been looking for her for years. He never said her name. He wanted her to come forward, not an impersonator. He hired a private investigator. His manager, Dominic Reeves, helped coordinate the search. But the trail was dead. Lenora Williams returned hundreds of results online. None matched. The old apartment had new tenants who'd never heard the name. The landline was disconnected. No social media. No digital trace. Nothing. He still had the sweatshirt. Her father's. Kept it on his tour bus in a sealed bag. Never washed it. He was afraid the smell, candle wax, oatmeal, January cold, would disappear. It was the only proof the night was real. And Lenora? Lenora didn't search. Not because she'd forgotten, because she genuinely believed she'd been forgotten. After the stroke, Odessa needed full-time care. Lenora became her caregiver at 19. Dropped everything. School, plans, the future she'd barely started imagining. Prince George's County for 2 years. then back to Baltimore when a cheaper apartment opened up. Odessa passed in 2020. Lenora was 23 and completely alone. Home health aid, $14 an hour, no benefits. Rode the bus across the city to care for other people's grandparents because she couldn't save her own. She never went to nursing school. The dream sat exactly where she'd left it, next to a proof book and a memory of a boy who said he'd come back. Sometimes, flipping channels late at night, she'd catch a face on a magazine show or an awards broadcast. Ethan Caldwell. Polished, famous, a world away from the shivering kid on her couch. She never connected them. He looked different, sounded different, lived in a different universe. Once, on the bus home from a 12-hour shift, she heard a song playing through someone's earbuds across the aisle. Something about January, something about bread. She almost turned her head, almost. But she was tired, and the bus kept moving, and the song faded into the noise of the city like everything else. She had no idea it was about her. No idea that the man who wrote it had spent a decade trying to find her. No idea that he was closer to finding her than he'd ever been. It started with a Tuesday afternoon, and a television Lenora wasn't even watching. She was at Mrs. Callahan's house, an 80-year-old widow who needed help with meals, laundry, and company. Lenora folded towels while Mrs. Callahan flipped between talk shows and cooking competitions. The TV was background noise. Then a face filled the screen. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, the confidence of stages and cameras. Ethan Caldwell announces sold-out world tour. His album January Girl, certified diamond. Lenora stopped folding. Something in the jawline, a flicker behind her ribs, not recognition, something she couldn't name. "You okay, honey?" Mrs. Callahan looked over her glasses. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Lenora blinked, shook it off. "I'm fine. He just looks like someone I used to know." She finished, went home, tried not to think about it. On the bus home, she hummed a melody she didn't recognize. Something she'd heard on the radio 100 times without listening. Something about January. 2 weeks later, New York. Talk show host Sandra Ellsworth, 40 million viewers, live. Sandra started with the usual, tour dates, the new album. Ethan answered on autopilot. Then she leaned forward. "There's a story behind January Girl that you've never fully told. You've mentioned a girl who split her last bread with you, but you've never said her name. Why not?" The studio went quiet. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, then up at the camera. "Because I don't want someone pretending to be her. I want her to hear this and know it's real." Sandra waited. Ethan took a breath and told the truth. All of it. January 2016. Baltimore. His mother disappearing. 3 days without food, knocking on doors in a storm, 6 doors that stayed closed. The 7th, a girl his age, black, starving herself, who opened the door without a single question. She broke her last piece of bread in half and gave me the bigger piece. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and she gave me the bigger half like it was nothing. He paused. The studio audience was completely still. She gave me dry clothes, her father's sweatshirt, the only thing she had left of him. We sat on her couch until 2 in the morning talking about what we wanted to do with our lives. She wanted to be a nurse. I told her I wanted to make music. A small, broken laugh. Neither of us believed we'd get there. Sandra's eyes were wet. And then, my father sent a car. I left. I promised I'd come back. I wrote her a letter from London. It came back. Returned to sender. Her grandmother had a stroke. She had to move. And I lost her. He looked directly into the camera, not at the audience, not at Sandra, into the lens, like he was speaking to one person. I've been looking for you for 10 years. I'm sorry it took this long, but I never stopped. And I'm not. The studio audience was crying. The clip was trending before the interview ended. Within minutes, the hashtag January Girl was everywhere. 40 million people watched that moment live, but only one of them was in Baltimore. Mrs. Callahan had called Lenora 20 minutes into the broadcast, frantic, voice shaking. "Turn on Channel 5 right now. That boy you said looked familiar? He's on TV telling your story. Your story, Lenora." Lenora turned it on. Stood in front of her small television in an apartment that cost $600 a month, and watched a famous man describe the worst night of his life, which was also the best night of hers. The bread, the couch, the 2 a.m. conversation, the sweatshirt, the letter. Her hands went to her mouth. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The tears came. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet. The kind that fall when something you buried a long time ago suddenly breaks the surface. "He remembered," she whispered. "He actually remembered." She held the worn proof book in her lap, opened it to the entry from January 14, 2016. Traced her own handwriting with her finger. She didn't call anyone, didn't post anything, didn't reach out. Because even now, even after hearing him say it on national television, a part of her whispered, "He's a superstar. What would he want with you?" But the world was already moving. Within 3 hours of the broadcast, someone in East Baltimore recognized the neighborhood details from Ethan's story. A former neighbor of Odessa's, a woman who'd lived 2 doors down in the old row house, contacted Ethan's team through social media. Dominic verified everything. Cross-referenced the address with public records. The trail that had been cold for a decade suddenly lit up. Lenora Williams, East Baltimore. Same zip code, different building, but same neighborhood. Still there. Dominic called Ethan at the studio. "We found her." Ethan didn't wait, didn't plan, didn't bring cameras or security or a publicist. He drove, alone. New York to Baltimore. 3 hours on I-95 with his hands tight on the wheel and his heart somewhere in his throat. He arrived close to midnight, parked on a dark street that looked nothing like his world. Walked up cracked concrete steps to a door on the 2nd floor. Stood there. Took a breath. Knocked. Lenora opened the door in a sweatshirt and leggings. Her eyes were still red from earlier. She looked at the man standing in her hallway, 10 years older, famous, wearing a coat that cost more than her rent. But the eyes, the same eyes. 5 seconds of silence that felt like 5 years. She spoke first, voice cracking. "You actually came back?" "I promised." She laughed, the kind of laugh that's half crying. "It's midnight, Ethan." "I know. I couldn't wait until morning." She stepped aside. He walked in. Small apartment, bare walls, kitchen table. She put on coffee. He sat down. And for a moment, it was 2 a.m. again. 2 people at a table, with nothing between them but honesty. They talked for hours, not about fame, not about money, about the 10 years, about Odessa, about the letters that came back, about the song she'd heard 100 times on the radio and never knew was hers. "Every word of January Girl is about you," Ethan said. "You know that, right? I heard it on the radio so many times. I never knew. Now you do." Something sat between them in the silence that followed. Not just gratitude, not just memory. Something that had been waiting 10 years to be named. Neither of them named it. Not yet. But they both knew it was there. Ethan stayed in Baltimore, canceled 3 days of obligations. Dominic handled the fallout, rescheduled interviews, postponed a shoot, fielded calls from a label that didn't understand why their biggest artist was sleeping on a couch in East Baltimore. But Ethan wasn't performing. He was picking up a conversation that got interrupted 10 years ago. They spent the days together, not as celebrity and fan, as two people who'd once shared bread and silence and somehow survived the decade between. He took her to a restaurant. She was uncomfortable. The prices, the stares. He noticed right away. After that, he brought takeout to her apartment instead. They walked the old neighborhood. She showed him where Odessa's building used to be, torn down, replaced by a parking lot. They stood there for a long time without speaking. Some things don't need words. Lenora showed him the proof book. Ethan found his entry, the one from January 14, 2016. Split bread with a boy in the cold. He smiled. He said he'd come back. His jaw tightened. He didn't speak for a long time. You kept this. All these years, I keep everything. That's how I remember the world's still good. She mentioned, quietly, like an afterthought, that she'd once dreamed of becoming a nurse practitioner. Couldn't afford the program. Life got in the way. It does that. One evening, they sat on her small balcony, city noise drifting below, coffee getting cold. Ethan told her about the sweatshirt. Your dad's. I still have it. It's on my tour bus in a sealed bag. I never washed it. Lenora stared at him. You kept my father's sweatshirt for 10 years? I was afraid the smell would disappear. The candle wax, the oatmeal, that apartment. He paused. It was the only proof I had that the night really happened. Something quiet shifted behind her eyes. She leaned forward and kissed him, brief, quiet, then pulled back. Sorry. I don't know why. I don't apologize. He kissed her back. Below the balcony, across the street, a car sat parked with tinted windows. A long camera lens glinted behind the glass. Someone was watching. But on the balcony, two people who'd waited 10 years for this moment didn't notice a thing. It took 3 days for the world to turn on her. The photos surfaced on a Tuesday. Tabloid sites first, then entertainment blogs, then everywhere. Ethan Caldwell, entering a rundown apartment building in East Baltimore, leaving the next morning in the same clothes, walking through a rough neighborhood with a woman nobody recognized. The headlines wrote themselves. Grammy winner's mystery woman, who is she? Caldwell's secret Baltimore visits, new flame or old flame? Then Craig Hollister got involved. Hollister was a tabloid journalist, the kind who built careers on dismantling other people's reputations. He didn't need facts, he needed angles. His first piece ran on a Wednesday morning. Caldwell's January Girl, heartwarming story or calculated PR stunt. Sources say the mystery woman is a $14 an hour homemade from Baltimore's poorest zip code. He never called her a gold digger. He didn't have to. The comment sections did it for him. Gold digger hit the lottery. Convenient she shows up right before his world tour. A broke black girl and a white superstar? Please, do the math. The cruelest part? Lenora didn't show up. She didn't contact Ethan after the talk show. She didn't reach out. He found her. He drove 3 hours. He knocked on her door at midnight. But none of that was in the article. The narrative had already been written, and it didn't need her side of the story. The paparazzi arrived on Thursday. 2 cars. Then 4. Then a small crowd with cameras and microphones camped outside her apartment building. Lenora couldn't leave for work without someone shoving a lens in her face. Lenora! Are you and Ethan together? How long have you known him? Did you really give him bread, or was that made up? She didn't engage. Head down, keys in hand, walked to the bus stop. Don't look, don't react, don't give them anything. But it didn't matter. The photos ran anyway. Caldwell's mystery woman refuses to comment, as if silence was evidence of guilt. The bus ride to work became a performance. Other passengers recognized her from the articles. Some stared, some whispered. One woman across the aisle held up her phone, recording. Lenora stared straight ahead and counted the stops until hers. Her neighbors started complaining. The landlord left a voicemail about disruptions to the building. 2 tenants signed a letter asking management to address the situation. The situation was Lenora existing in her own apartment. Mrs. Callahan's daughter called the home health agency. "Is it appropriate for someone in the tabloids to be caring for my mother?" Lenora's supervisor called her in. Didn't fire her, but suggested she take a few days off until things settle down. Unpaid. Tamara was furious. She showed up at Lenora's apartment that night with grocery bags and rage. "They're punishing you? Because some photographer won't leave you alone? You didn't do anything wrong." "I know. So fight back. Post something. Tell them what really happened." Lenora shook her head. "Don't argue with strangers, Tamara. That's their game, not ours." Tamara stared at her. "How are you this calm?" "I'm not calm. I'm tired. There's a difference." Ethan tried to fix it. He posted a statement on Instagram, carefully worded, emotional, direct. "The woman in these photos saved my life 10 years ago. She didn't ask for fame. She didn't ask for any of this. Leave her alone." It made things worse. The statement confirmed the relationship, which doubled the media attention. More cameras, more articles, more strangers on the internet dissecting a woman they'd never met. Hollister published a follow-up the next day. "If Caldwell's story is real, where's the proof? No photos from 2016. No witnesses. No records. Just his word. And a conveniently timed reunion right before a world tour launch." Social media split down the middle. Half defended Lenora, half called it a publicity stunt. The debate wasn't about truth anymore. It was about clicks, engagement. Lenora Williams had become a topic, not a person. Ethan called her that night. She could hear the guilt in his voice before he said a word. "I'm sorry, I thought the statement would help. Every time you say my name, another camera shows up." Her voice was flat. Not angry. Worse. Resigned. "I'm not built for this world, Ethan. I'll fix it. You can't fix it. This is what happens when someone like me ends up next to someone like you. People don't see a love story. They see a headline." Silence on the line. The kind that sounds like something breaking. "I never wanted this for you," he said. "You know that, right?" "I know." She closed her eyes. "But wanting and reality don't live in the same house, Ethan." A week passed. The cameras didn't leave. The comments didn't stop. Lenora went back to work, but her patients' families looked at her differently now. Whispers in the hallway. Sideways glances when she entered a room. One family requested a different aide. Didn't say why. Didn't have to. The weight of other people's opinions pressed down on her shoulders every single day. Heavier than any shift she'd ever worked. She told Ethan she needed space. They sat across from each other at her kitchen table. The same table where they'd had coffee the night he came back. But now the warmth was gone. Replaced by something heavier. "I care about you," she said, "but this, the cameras, the articles, people calling me things I'm not, I can't live in this. I've been fighting my entire life, Ethan. I'm tired." He didn't argue, didn't push. Just looked at her with the same eyes that had looked at her from the porch 10 years ago. Except now they were full of something worse than cold. They were full of the fear of losing her again. "I spent 10 years looking for you," he said quietly. I'll wait as long as you need." He left. The door closed behind him, the apartment quiet. Lenora sat alone at the table for a long time. The proof book lay in front of her, the same notebook she'd carried since she was a teenager. The same one where she'd written about strangers buying groceries for each other, and bus drivers waiting for running passengers, and a boy who smiled when she gave him bread. She opened it, turned past the entries, past the January 14 page, all the way to a blank page near the back. She picked up a pen. Her hand was steady, her eyes were not. She didn't write about kindness or proof that good exists. She wrote 5 words. Maybe some people only meet once. Then she closed the book, put it in a drawer, sat in the dark. Tamara found her 3 days later. Sitting in the dark, phone off, proof book in a drawer, curtains drawn against the cameras still parked outside. Tamara didn't lecture, didn't yell, didn't push. She sat across from Lenora at the kitchen table, put 2 coffees between them, and asked one question. What would Odessa say? Lenora didn't answer. Not right away. She stared at the coffee, at the steam rising off it, at her hands wrapped around nothing. Then, slowly, like she was pulling the words up from somewhere deep and buried, she'd say, "You don't run from love because it's hard. You run from love because you're scared. And scared ain't a reason." Tamara didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just nodded. So? Lenora sat still for a long time. Then she reached across the table, picked up her phone, and turned it on. 43 missed calls, 200 messages. She ignored all of them except one. Ethan. She didn't call him back. Not yet. But she left the phone on. That was enough for now. While Lenora sat in the dark, Ethan had been making a phone call of his own. He called his father. Their relationship hadn't healed. Not really. Harold Caldwell was still the man who'd chosen politics over his son. Still the man who shipped an 18-year-old to London to keep his mess out of the press. But this wasn't about them. Not anymore. Dad. Ethan's voice was stripped bare. No anger, no performance, just need. The woman who saved me, the night Mom left, she's being destroyed. The tabloids are calling her a liar. They're calling her a gold digger. She can barely leave her apartment. Harold listened. For once, he didn't calculate, or maybe he did, and the math came out the same either way. What do you need? It was the first time in Ethan's life his father had asked that question and meant it. Proof. Everything. Anything that shows the story is real. Harold's team moved fast. Political machinery is good for something. It knows how to find records. Within 48 hours, they had everything. The motel records from January 2016, Vivian Caldwell's check-in, the eviction date 3 days later. Proof that Ethan was there. Proof that his mother abandoned him in East Baltimore that winter. 2 letters postmarked London, spring 2016. Both stamped, "Return to sender, no longer at this address." Proof that Ethan tried to reach her. Proof that she was already gone. Odessa Brown's hospital admission, stroke, February 2016. 3 weeks after the night Lenora found Ethan on her porch. Proof that Lenora's world collapsed right after his did. Every detail of every story lined up. The timeline was airtight. The evidence was real. And none of it had been staged or manufactured. Because you can't fake a decade of records. Ethan called Lenora with the news. She listened. Said nothing for a long time. "It's all there," he said. "Everything. The motel, the letters, your grandmother's hospital records. It's real, Lenora, and we can prove it." She exhaled, long and slow. The first full breath she'd taken in a week. Then the phone rang again. Sandra Ellsworth, the same talk show host who'd interviewed Ethan. She'd watched the fallout and the tabloids, and she wanted to set the record straight. "I want to do a follow-up," Sandra told Ethan's team, both of them, together, live. Let her tell her side. Ethan called Lenora. "Sandra wants us on the show, together. You tell your story in your own words. Nobody else's version, just yours." Lenora was quiet. Then, "I'm not doing this for cameras. I'm not doing it for followers or hashtags. I'm doing it so people stop calling me something I'm not." A pause, then quieter. "And for Odessa. Because she raised me to tell the truth even when nobody wants to hear it." The night before the interview, Lenora sat alone at her kitchen table. The apartment was clean, her clothes were laid out. The flight to New York was booked for 6 in the morning. She pulled the proof book out of the drawer, opened it to a fresh page. The first time she'd opened it since writing those 5 words. She picked up a pen. "Tomorrow I tell the truth. That's all I've ever had." She closed the book, held it against her chest for a moment, then picked up her phone and called Ethan. 2 words. That was all she said. All she needed. "I'm ready." The studio was cold. Lenora noticed that first. 45 million viewers. More than the first interview. Sandra Ellsworth's set was bright and polished, the kind of room designed to make people feel comfortable on camera. It didn't work on Lenora. She sat in a chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, wearing a blouse Tamara had picked out the night before, and tried to remember how to breathe. Ethan sat beside her. His hand found hers under the table. She didn't pull away. Sandra opened the way she always did, warm, controlled, direct. "Last time you were on this show, Ethan, you told 40 million people about a girl who changed your life. Tonight, she's sitting right next to you. Lenora, I want to start with you. What do you remember about that night?" Lenora looked at Sandra, not at the cameras, not at the audience, just at the woman asking the question. "I remember being hungry. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I remember a knock on the door. I remember a boy who looked like he hadn't eaten either, maybe longer than me. And I remember my grandmother's voice in my head saying there's always enough when your hands know how to share." She paused. The studio was silent. "So I broke the bread in half, gave him the bigger piece. That's it. That's the whole story." Sandra leaned forward. "You didn't think it was a big deal?" "It was bread. It was January. He was cold. That's not a big deal. That's just what you do. The tabloids have called you some very unkind things this week. What do you say to that?" Lenora didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I've been called worse by better. I'm a black woman from East Baltimore who makes $14 an hour. People have been deciding who I am my whole life. But I know who I am. And so does he." The audience didn't clap. They didn't need to. The silence in the room said more. Then Ethan moved. He reached under his chair, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out something the cameras didn't expect. A folded piece of paper. Old. Yellowed. Creased from years of careful handling. The edges were soft from being unfolded and refolded hundreds of times. He placed it on the table and opened it. Lenora looked down and stopped breathing. It was her handwriting. 19-year-old handwriting. The address of the row house in East Baltimore. Odessa's landline number. Written on a piece of paper torn from a proof book 10 years ago. Her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes filled. 10 years. That piece of paper had crossed an ocean, survived tour buses and hotel rooms, stayed folded in his pocket like a prayer. You kept that? Ethan's voice was thick. I kept everything. The address, the sweatshirt, the letters that came back, I kept all of it because I never stopped believing I'd find you. Sandra turned to the camera, barely holding herself together. Why was finding her so important to you? Because she taught me what kindness looks like when it costs you everything you have. And I will not let anyone turn that into something ugly. The studio was completely still. Then Sandra turned to the screen behind her. We've verified every part of this story. Let me show you what we found. One by one, the evidence appeared on the screen. Motel records from January 2016. Vivian Caldwell. Checked in December 28th, evicted January 14. Room 112. The same day Ethan knocked on Lenora's door. 2 letters postmarked London, March and April 2016. Both addressed to the row house, both stamped in red. Return to sender, no longer at this address. Odessa Brown's hospital admission, Baltimore General, stroke. February 3, 2016. 3 weeks after the night in question. And finally, a photograph of the proof book, open to a page in faded ink. Jan 14. Split bread with a boy in the cold. He smiled. He said he'd come back. Sandra let it sit on screen for a long time. Nobody spoke. This isn't a PR stunt, Sandra said, turning back to the camera. This is a love story that started with a loaf of bread and survived 10 years of silence. The clip was online before the interview was even finished. Within an hour, #JanuaryGirl was trending worldwide. #Justice for Lenora followed. The comment sections that had called her a gold digger 3 days ago now flooded with apologies, tears, support. Strangers posting their own stories of kindness. Small moments they'd never told anyone about, inspired by a woman who split her last bread with a stranger and never expected a thing. The next morning, Senator Harold Caldwell released a statement. Not from his office, not through a press secretary. From his personal account, filmed on his phone in his living room. No suit, no flag behind him, just a man who looked like he hadn't slept. I need to say something I should have said a long time ago. He paused, looked directly into the camera. When my son was 18 years old, his mother left him alone in a motel in Baltimore in the middle of January. I wasn't there. I should have been, but I wasn't. A 19-year-old girl named Lenora Williams opened her door, gave him food, gave him warmth, and gave him a reason to believe people could still be good. She did what I failed to do. She showed up. Another pause. His jaw tightened. The debt we owe kindness can never be overpaid, he continued. Lenora Williams didn't save my son for recognition. She didn't do it for cameras or money or fame. She did it because that's who she is. And anyone who attacks her character is attacking everything decent about this country. The statement went viral. The political weight behind it silenced the last holdouts. Editors who'd run Hollister's pieces quietly pulled them. Networks that had debated the story's authenticity pivoted to covering the evidence. Craig Hollister never published a correction. He never apologized. He just stopped writing about them. Moved on to the next story. The silence was his only acknowledgement that he'd been wrong. And even that was about self-preservation, not conscience. Public opinion didn't just shift. It reversed completely. Lenora Williams went from gold digger to the woman who reminded America what kindness means. Her face was on magazine covers she'd never be able to afford. Her name was spoken by people who would never know what it's like to choose between bread and hunger. But here's what nobody talked about. What the trending hashtags and the viral clips and the heartwarming headlines all managed to skip over. For 3 days, Lenora Williams sat alone in her apartment while strangers called her a liar. For 3 days, nobody believed her. It only changed because there were motel records and returned letters and hospital admissions. Because the receipts existed. But what if they didn't? What if the motel had purged its files? What if the letters got lost? What if Odessa's hospital had closed? She'd still be the scammer from Baltimore. The truth needed proof. Her kindness never did. Lenora went back to work on a Monday. Mrs. Callahan's daughter called the agency to apologize personally. So did the supervisor. Lenora accepted both the same way, without drama, without grudges. We're good. Let's just get back to it. The family that had requested a different aide sent flowers. Lenora put them on Mrs. Callahan's nightstand. These are for you, she told the old woman. Somebody felt bad. Mrs. Callahan smiled. About time. Ethan established the Odessa Brown Foundation within a month. Housing stability grants and nursing scholarships for caregivers in underserved communities. The first scholarship recipient was Lenora Williams. She cried when she read the acceptance letter from the University of Maryland's nurse practitioner program. Tamara held her in the kitchen while she sobbed. The first time the audience had seen Lenora fully break down. Odessa's up there saying, "About damn time," Tamara whispered. Lenora didn't move out of the neighborhood. Didn't upgrade. Didn't leave. This is home. You don't leave home just because you can afford to. One evening in January, exactly 10 years and 1 month after the night they met, Ethan and Lenora sat on her building's front steps. Cold air. Hot coffee. Breath turning to fog between them. He was wearing the sweatshirt. Her father's. He'd brought it back after 10 years. Still in the sealed bag, still unwashed, still carrying the ghost of candle wax and oatmeal in a January night that changed 2 lives. Lenora touched the fabric, ran her fingers across the collar. It still smells like that apartment. I know. She pulled the proof book from her coat pocket, opened it to the last page, picked up a pen, and wrote, with him watching, "He came back." Ethan read it. His eyes filled. He couldn't speak for a long time. You didn't have to write that. I write everything down. That's how I remember the world's still good. She leaned into him. The same cold air as 10 years ago. But this time, neither of them was alone. They got married on a quiet Saturday in March. Lenora's neighborhood church in East Baltimore. Not a spectacle. Just 30 people. A potluck reception. Tamara as maid of honor. Ethan's vows were simple. 10 years ago, you gave me the bigger half. I'm spending the rest of my life making that even. Lenora's vows were simpler. You said you'd come back. You did. I don't need anything else. After the ceremony, Lenora walked to the front row, picked up her bouquet, and placed it gently on an empty chair. A small, faded photograph of Grandma Odessa was taped to the seat. Tamara squeezed her shoulder. Nobody said a word. They didn't need to. Lenora completed her nurse practitioner program 2 years later. She works at a community health clinic in East Baltimore, same zip code she grew up in. Ethan still tours, but Baltimore is home now. He bought a house 3 blocks from where Lenora grew up. He re-recorded January Girl with one addition at the end. Lenora's voice, speaking the words Odessa said that night. There's always enough when your hands know how to share. It became the most streamed version of the song. The Odessa Brown Foundation has funded 40 nursing scholarships and housed 150 families in 3 years. Harold's relationship with Ethan is repairing. Not perfect, but present. Lenora insists. He's your father. Complicated doesn't mean canceled. Craig Hollister never wrote about them again. Lenora's proof book is full. She started a second one. The first entry reads, Today, a patient told me I gave her hope. That counts. She still lives on the same block in East Baltimore, still rides the same bus, still writes down proof that good exists, the way she's done since she was a kid. If you had one piece of bread and a stranger knocked on your door, would you share it? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
I keep thinking about one thing, the smallest thing you do for someone, something you forget by morning, might be the thing they carry for the rest of their life. You never know. A moment that cost you almost nothing could mean everything to the person on the other side. And you'll never see it. You'll never know how far it traveled, but it traveled. And here's something the world needs to hear. Giving when you have nothing is not weakness. It's the purest form of strength there is. Anybody can be generous when their pockets are full, but when you're hungry and you still share, when you're struggling and you still show up for someone else, that's a character. That's the kind of person the world doesn't deserve, but desperately needs. And one more thing, keep your promises. Even when life gets in the way, even when years go by, even when it seems too late, it's never too late to show up for someone who believes in you. The people who wait for you deserve to know they weren't wrong for waiting. So tell me, had a small act of kindness from a stranger ever changed your life? Or have you done something small for someone that turned out to mean more than you thought? Drop it in the comments. If this one hit you, share it, like it, subscribe so you're here for the next one. Because there's always enough when your hands know how to share.